So, I was talking to Eddie, and we were talking about meditation instructions. Barry's famous saying, "You can't do it wrong." And Eddie was saying, well, that's all very well, but, and I kind of agree. So, this evening, fruits of the practice. What's the point of a pointless practice? And beyond. Remember Dharma talk Barry gave quite a few years ago now, where he was just talking about going around to a friend's for dinner. And his friend is about the same age as him, so I suppose at that point, probably late 60s or something, was telling Barry all about his exercise regime, how fantastic it was, how much fitter he was, how his heart rate was slower, his breathing was deeper and slower, his muscles were so, he could just do so much more. And Barry was saying, yeah, this is completely the opposite of Zazen, isn't it? Because we don't do Zazen to fix anything, to improve anything. There's no point to it. I don't do it to make my knees, more flexible, cure me arthritis. Oh, in fact, I do this practice even if it made my arthritis worse. We do it because it's what we do. And then there's the famous Uchiyama quote. Uchiyama, fantastic Japanese teacher, wrote Opening the Hand of Thought. I think one of my favourite Japanese Zen books, certainly. And he was saying about his teacher, who was a wonderfully, kind of impressive bear of a teacher, sit like a rock for hours, huge charisma. People would kind of go, in his presence. And Uchiyama, the young monk students, said, "Oh, great master, if I sit for decades and achieve realization, will I be like you?" And of course his teacher goes, "You're a wimp. No, you won't ever be like me. Zazen is completely useless. I was like this before I started sitting." And this decades later, 30 years, 40 years, whatever it is, Uchiyama says, and of course he was absolutely right. I'm still a wimp. Zazen is useless. No gain. We've just been chanting the Heart Sutra. No gain, it says. And we take this very seriously in a kind of Soto-influenced Zen. We have Dogen's idea of the identity of practice and realization. Sitting is sitting. Sitting is realization in a sense, in and of itself. We don't do it for, we're not looking beyond. And yet, and this is where the "and yet" starts coming. Joko often, well, I don't know often, and we might hear about that later, but certainly in her books from time to time she talks about stages of practice, about the path as, in that sense, a literal path. When you start out, it's like this. Later on, it's like this. So there's evolution, development, and very much for Joko the point was to be absolutely be on whatever stage of the path one was. And she used the analogy of learning to swim. When you're learning to swim, when you can't swim and you're a complete beginner, maybe you do exercises on the side of the pool. You use armbands, floats, whatever. Be that beginner, completely be that beginner. And then later on, if you end up as an Olympic swimmer, fantastic. But that's just another stage. It's not better. It's not different in that sense. It's just where you are at that moment. But it led me to thinking more generally about, we talk about not doing. What is it that we're doing when we're not doing? Because not doing is itself a kind of doing. Uchiyama again actually talks about, I'm sitting, I'm completely still, I'm sort of perfect Zazen posture. Well, I'm still breathing, my lungs are moving. Hopefully my heart is pumping blood around, bringing oxygen to my cells, they're all functioning. And in fact, quite possibly hear my stomach, my gut digesting. That's not still. So this within stillness, there is still infinite movement. And in fact, in a way, all I'm doing with my not doing is bringing attention to what I'm doing anyway, to what's going on. And it is a fact that the stiller we sit, the more we become aware of all of those things which are happening at below the level of our intention. And in a sense, what we're doing is just, to a greater or a lesser degree, bracketing out intention, will, and seeing what happens. And that might be in terms of thoughts, and it might be in terms of emotions, and it might be in terms of bodily feelings. It might be the sounds I'm hearing. Paying attention to all of that, all that I normally miss. And I think all body practices that bring us back towards an awareness of the body, not the body as a tool, not the body as a machine, not the body as a means of attainment of something, whether it's a personal best or whatever, but practices ideally like yoga, though, we can do that in a spirit of attainment, like qigong, like tai chi, and obviously like meditative forms, which are just about listening to my body, which tells me so much. It's a source of my history, it's a source of my present. It tells me about my emotional mood that I might or might not be aware of. It tells me things about the state of various parts of me, how they're relating, which I might or might not be aware of. It tells me about me. Me not in the sense of this intention, this self thing, but a more inclusive, fuller sense of me. And what happens then? Maybe there's fullness. Maybe it's too full. Maybe I open the door and thoughts, feelings, emotions come tumbling out. Maybe they can be almost overwhelming. That happens. A lot of this practice is about finding the space to be okay with those thoughts. And actually one of the things that we are learning here all the time, and maybe it's useful to begin to think in terms of those things which we can learn, which we can get better at, which are useful to us, which are maybe essential to what we're doing, or maybe just nice, cool things. And that depends maybe on the spirit in which we're doing them, but I'll come back to that. Where I was going was discipline, perseverance, patience. Something I seem to find myself saying a lot at the moment is just about practice as return, coming back and back and back, coming back to the cushion every day, twice a day, even if it's just to say, greetings, O cushion, diamond seat of enlightenment. Hi, I'm here. It's certainly every time, either sitting in Zazen or just in my everyday life, that I realise I was over there, that I'm back. I've come back to the moment, I've come back to myself in that sense. Sitting is always return, and it's the discipline of return, allowing yourself to return. And there are times when being this bigger container that Joko talks about can be impossible, can be terrifyingly hard. But we return to the cushion, we return to this experience. And in that sense, we just do our best. We probably don't want to, but we still come back and we do our best. Then there are the other times when actually it's pretty good. There's space. Suddenly there's space. Suddenly it can seem like infinite space. There's a thought. Maybe there's a feeling that goes with that thought. Another thought. And actually there's gaps, there's space, there's actually this sense of, well, we can call it rest. We can call it space. We can call it emptiness, though that maybe shifts us in a dangerous direction. The question then is really, what are we going to do with this gap, this space, this disconnection? There was me having a thought, and then there was me having a feeling, and then there was another thought. And what happens in between? And I think this is one way in which we can begin to think about an important difference in the ways that we can take this practice, because either I can say, oh, that's really good. That's opening onto the universe. That's peaceful. That's really calm. It's hard. I've had a hard day and I can really use that. It's just peace, restfulness. God, going to come here again. Absolutely. And of course, next time I sit in it, fireworks everywhere. Now I've got to get back, got to find that. Or we can kind of get that actually, what was happening in that space? In a sense, there was just the awareness there. Not me in any special sense. No intention, no will, no need being expressed in that moment. Just this. Now if I can allow that to take a step back from the me, not try and immediately plug that in, I'm one stage nearer enlightenment, or, oh, how wonderful, I'll come here and rest as often as I can. If I can just let that be, then that's something. And curiously, that pairs with the fireworks and the rolling clouds of emotion. It's kind of like round the other side of the circle. Because what we're experiencing here isn't a state. It's not, oh, now I'm calm and happy, or, oh, now it's all dreadful. It's, I'm experiencing that experiencing itself. And actually, in these gaps, there's an opening, a settling, a kind of room to maneuver as well. Say too much, make it all go wrong, collapse. It's after all, it's just this, it's just a gap, but a really significant one. Last time, started talking about the mirage, real illusions. Being in the desert, seeing the water rippling over the surface of the desert, knowing it's not there, but seeing it anyway. It's an illusion, but it's real. It's genuinely what I see. It's genuinely what any similarly sighted person to me would see in the same kind of context. The difference is, again, in the way that we're going to take things is, do I rush off and try and bathe in the water? Do I understand intellectually what's happening and then rush off to the water anyway? Or do I let that experience and the re-experience of that experience over days, months, weeks, years, decades allow me to experience that mirage a little differently, to see it as both the illusion of water and as air on hot sand, diffracting, refracting, whatever it's actually doing, light. And if I do that, how does it change the way that I act in the world, that I behave in the world? And I think both of these things that I've been talking about in relation to Zazen, both the simply learning to hold whatever is there and the experiencing the spaciousness, the gap, the, in a sense, not meanness of it. If we do that consistently, if we do that as return, if we do that as coming back and coming back and coming back, it begins inevitably to reframe our orientation on the world. And in terms of the big picture, I'd suggest that that's an orientation and an experience of non-separation from the world, rather than experiencing ourselves as separate, as closed off, as purely individual. Which brings us to the point. The point in this sense being the bodhisattva path, the saving all beings aspect. Which I mention even though at one level it's quite terrifying because ridiculous and impossible. And yet, another and yet that's what this practice is. If I'm doing it just for what I think of as this being, and that's the limit of my understanding, the limit of my aspiration, then that's fine. Chill out. Fantastic. But that's not what this practice is for. It's about connection. It's about relationship. It's about how we are in the world and how we are with each other. Learning to walk together, as we had in that Katagiri poem the other week. Learning to walk together. I'm going to put just one more caveat in before I finish, which is a lot of Zen students, teachers will go, yeah, but the problem is where we let intention, where we let conceptual thinking in, and then it all starts to go wrong. What we need to do is just be open. But that's about as far as it goes. And actually, in our own wonderful ordinary mind, Koan, there's a kind of invitation to do that. Got it here. There's only 2 lines of it, so we don't even need to go too far. Joshua asked Nansen, "What is the way?" "Ordinary mind is the way," Nansen replied. And then this is "Shall I try to seek after it?" Joshua asked. "If you try for it, you will become separated from it," responded Nansen. "How can I know the way unless I try for it?" persisted Joshua. And then we go on. And there we have it. There we have the whole kind of nub of the thing, which tends to be, in both Soto and Rinzai Zen, a little, okay, sit down and wait to get enlightened. You can't try. You can't use will, intention, words. Forget all that. And this is clearly a vastly important lesson. We're so used to, no, I can fix it. I can push and I can move that. Okay. No, you can't. I can't fix it. I can't control it. And that's a hugely important lesson for us all to learn, because that's the basic lesson of the limitations of self. But if I may be permitted a word in criticism of a great master, I think that's still a profoundly dualistic way of saying it. Shall I try to seek after it? If you try for it, you will become separated. Yeah, true. But if you don't try, where are you going to end up? I think we have to get beyond the dualism of trying and not trying, which we could invent some lovely terms for. Tryingless trying, or whatever. But it's outside that dualism. And I don't mean that in some weird, theoretical, woofy, mystical way. I mean, that's learning, that actually is learning to walk together. We relate, we respond. Sometimes we use words, sometimes we use gestures. Sometimes there are 1,000 of us, sometimes it's just me, sometimes there's 2 of us. We learn to work in a way that's beyond this naive image of my intention, my will, but equally that, I just have to sit here. Enlightenment may or may not happen. We'll take this up in some of the following talks again. As this started out as a conversation with Eddie, I'll be fascinated to see if he's got anything to say about it. But it will come around. We'll talk some more.